What if the thing you fear most is not your enemy, but your unrecognized nature? For centuries, the salamander was spoken of as a wonder, a creature said to live inside a furnace, untouched by the very flame that reduces all else to ash. The old natural historians insisted this was a matter of temperature. Pliny the Elder, Roman author, believed that animal carried a coldness so absolute that it could smother fire on contact, the way ice quenches a flame. But the alchemists who inherited this legend saw something else entirely. They did not see a cold-blooded lizard, they saw a mirror. Because somewhere within you is a substance that has always been fireproof, not protected from the heat of your life, but perfected by it. This is not a power you must acquire from outside yourself. It is not a shield you must go out and build. It is a quality that has always existed inside you, dormant, waiting only to be recognized. The ancients did not ask, "How do I avoid the furnace?" They asked the stranger, more unsettling question, "What in me was built to live there?" Today we are going to walk the question all the way down, through the emblem books, through the elemental philosophies, through this long slow science of heat and color, until it arrives exactly where it was always meant to, inside you. Every transformation begins with an encounter between two forces that seem, at first, entirely opposed: the fire and the thing that must pass through it. In the old traditions, fire was called an extreme element, the one force that consumes rather than sustains. Nearly everything that lives must flee it or be destroyed by it. This is how most of us relate to our own hardships. We treat the heat of difficulty as something wholly outside us, an enemy at the gate, something to be extinguished or escaped rather than entered. Whatever the biological truth of it, the salamander had become something larger than an animal. It had become an idea that self and fire are not necessarily enemies, that they are only kept apart by an invisible barrier, a misunderstanding of what fire is actually for, not a punishment, a furnace. This is the first pillar. Somewhere in you, the same two forces exist: the pressure of your life and the part of you capable of living inside that pressure without being destroyed by it. They feel separate now, they are not meant to stay that way. The Hermetic tradition holds a single, quiet law beneath all of its symbols: that what looks like opposition is often only a difference in degree, but the same in nature. This law becomes visible the moment you step into the Paracelsian worldview, a picture of reality in which the visible world we inhabit is shadowed everywhere by an invisible one. In his treatise on nymphs, sylphs, and salamanders, Paracelsus described a fourfold population of beings, each one composed of a single element rather than the mixture that makes up a human life. Later, Manly P. Hall would translate this dense old philosophy into a clearer shape, describing gnomes as guardians of chemical earth, undines as dwellers in the vital humidity of water, sylphs as delicate beings moving through the spiritual air, and salamanders as the most volatile of the four, living not in ordinary flame but in what Hall called the invisible fire, the spiritual ether beneath physical heat. Paracelsus made a striking claim about these beings. They were not descended from Adam. They were middle beings, possessing a body and even a kind of soul, yet lacking the divine spark carried by humanity unless they joined with a human life directly. They do not have an immortal soul, yet they are not merely animals, existing instead as something between the human and the merely natural. And where a person walks on soil, Paracelsus wrote, the salamander walks on fire. For the salamander, flame is not a threat. It is simply the ground beneath its feet, its home. This is the deeper teaching folded into the meat. What feels like conflict within you, ambition against stillness, desire against discipline, the parts of you that seem to war endlessly with one another, is very often the same essential energy, simply unrefined, simply standing on different ground than you are used to. Not two forces at war, one flame expressing itself at different temperatures, waiting for you to recognize it as a single thing. But before anything can live inside the fire, it must first be reduced by it. The alchemists call this stage calcination, the blackening, the dissolution, the moment when a substance loses its old form entirely and becomes something unrecognizable to itself. Michael Meyer, in his emblem book Atalanta Fugains, placed the salamander at precisely this threshold, linking its endurance directly to the final labor of the great work. As the salamander lives in fire, so also does the stone. But the stone was not born fireproof, it became so, and only through undergoing the very heat that should have destroyed it. This unfolds in stages, and the old texts were remarkably precise about them. Solomon Trismosin, in Splendor Solis, described the matter of the work passing through a sequence of colors during its long decoction, turning black, then yellow, then finally red, each color marking a different depth of the transformation. The blackness is the death of the old form. It is the stage no one wants to speak about because it does not feel like progress. It feels like loss. The yellow is the uncertain in-between, neither what you were nor what you are becoming. And only after both of these is the red reached, the stage the salamander was set to represent, the point where the fire has done its complete work and the substance is, at last, made stable within it. This is the part of your own life that mirrors the laboratory most exactly. The identity you built for cooler conditions, the certainties that made sense before the heat arrived, the version of yourself that felt solid. All of it must be allowed to blacken and fall away, not because it was worthless, but because it was false, and the way that anything unfinished is false. What is unrefined cannot survive the furnace unchanged, and it was never meant to. What separates ordinary calcination from what the old alchemists called philosophical calcination is this: nothing essential is lost in the second kind. Only what is false is burned away, while the living core is carried through the fire intact and made stronger by having passed through it. Mary Ann Atwood, writing on the Hermetic Mystery, drew this distinction with great care. Common calcination, she explained, simply reduces a body to dead ash, an ending, nothing more. But philosophical calcination preserves what she called the radical humidity of the substance, its essential living moisture, even as the fire strips away everything false around it. Through this process, she wrote, the stone itself becomes a true salamander, nourished and grows in the elementary fire, rather than being consumed by it. The very thing that should destroy it becomes instead its food. The Book of Lamspring, preserved within the great compilation known as the Hermetic Museum, describes this same principle through the image of augmentation. The idea that the substance does not simply survive one pass through the flame and stop there. It is returned to the furnace again and again, and with each return its color deepens, its potency increases. The text calls this reiteration not punishment repeated but refinement repeated, the same trial revisited until what was once merely tolerable becomes gradually glorious. This is not so different from what modern psychology names integration. The parts of you that once felt like opposites, the wounded and the capable, the anxious and the steady, the parts you have hidden away because they once looked like weaknesses, are not meant to be separated from you forever. They are meant to be brought back into one form, the way scattered, warring colors move through black, then gold, before finally settling into a single steady red. Not exile, integration. The war does not end because one side wins. It ends because both sides are finally recognized as belonging to the very same self, refined by the same fire, return to it again and again until what remains is no longer fragile but glorious. As within, so without. Trismusin understood that this integration required something the emblem books called the government of the fires, a delicate art of balance. Too little heat and the matter stays dead, unchanged, going nowhere. Too much and the substance is destroyed outright, is spirit driven off before it can ever be fixed. Only the steady, governed heat that mimics the constancy of the sun rather than the violence of a wildfire, allows the matter to move safely through its colors until, as the old text described it, the volatile has finally, the sun and moon have come home. This is the quieter half of the teaching, and it is easy to miss beneath all the talk of fire and dissolution. The goal was never to endure maximum heat forever. It was to learn the art of governing your own inner fire, knowing when to feed it and when to let it rest, so that transformation happens at the pace a living thing can actually survive. And Hall reminds us that the salamander does not live in the visible flame at all, but in something deeper, the essence beneath the fire, the invisible current that makes physical combustion possible in the first place. He wrote that without these fire spirits, ordinary flame could not exist at all, and that direct communion with them was never possible through the flame itself, but only through subtler mediums, like the fragrant smoke of incense and ethereal mist through which what is otherwise unreachable might finally be met halfway. Perhaps this, too, is instructive. The part of you that can live inside your own difficulties is rarely reached by confronting the fire directly. It is reached through subtle practices, stillness, reflection, patience, the incense through which the invisible becomes briefly visible. What happens in the inner furnace does not stay there. A person who has stopped fleeing their own difficulties begins to move differently through the world, steadier, less reactive, less afraid of heat they once believed would destroy them. The old religious emblem makers understood this too. The salamander appeared not only in laboratories, but in devotional art as a symbol of a soul remaining whole while passing through hardship, unmarred by what should have consumed it. Not because the fire was gentle, because something in the soul had already learned to live there. You are not asked to avoid the fire, you were never meant to. You are only asked to discover what in you was built to withstand it and, in time, to be nourished by it. So the question is not whether the fire will come, it always does. The question is only this: are you ready to find out what in you was always meant to live there?